The 54th International Bill Chess Festival is well underway, and yesterday we had the first round of the Grandmaster Triathlon Classical Tournament. So again, let me remind you of the format. 8 invited Grandmasters, they're playing a round-robin tournament between each other. The triathlon consists of 3 tournaments. It's a classical tournament, a rapid tournament, and double-round blitz tournament. The rapid tournament already has finished, which was played on last Sunday, and on Tuesday was given the green light to the classical tournament. So 3 of the games already finished with a decisive score. So let's check some of the most interesting moments in the games. So now we are going to follow the game of Gata Kamsky against Noel Studer. This was the game which finished the fastest, and I would have to say probably mainly thanks to the excellent preparation by the American Grandmaster. After e4, I suppose that the Swiss Grandmaster was slightly surprised by Kamsky's choice. Now knight c3 was a very tricky way to avoid any Sicilian-Sveshnikov debate. Bishop c4, d6, d3. Now this is a very common idea because white plays knight e2, knight f1 and knight e3, fighting for the d5 square. And here Noel decided to play h6 and g6, a slightly, not the main line in this position, but it appears to be playable. And here after knight f1, bishop g7, Kamsky played knight e3, knight f6, and h4, a very interesting idea to think about playing h5 next, and if black would play h5 himself, he needs to understand what happens after knight e5 and bishop g5, and the g5 square is real weak. And I guess that was the reason why the Swiss Grandmaster decided to play rook b8, seek some kind of activity at a queen side, threatening to play b5. This prompted the American Grandmaster to play a4 to stop the threats. And now after the short castle, knight e5, c3 already is threatening, the knight on d4 has to go back. So after knight takes on d5, bishop takes on d5, white is threatening to play h5 to secure outpost on f5, and after king h8, h5, advantage of white is quite obvious. Now at this point, probably Studer wasn't really happy with the position, he decided to launch a counter attack. So he played f5. Apparently, in the hindsight, that was not the best decision. Instead of f5, he should have played g5 and tried to hold a worse position. After f5, Kamsky included c3, pushing away the knight from d4 and only then to take on g6. Studer tried to complicate matters with f4, knight c4, the knight on d4 still under attack, so is the pawn on g6. After queen g5, black tried to complicate matters by counter-attacking the pawn on g2. American was very tactically alert to the possibilities and played the simple move king f1. And now the black knight had to go away, and after knight takes on d6, white already is up an extra pawn and simply enjoys the better position. Now after bishop d7, h takes on g6, queen takes on g6, queen h5, white started to simplify the matters by trading queens, and this is something that black cannot reject because his own king is quite weak on h8. So after the trade, rook takes on h5, the black pawn on b7 is also quite weak, and after knight c7, bishop takes on b7 is not good because of rook f6, and white loses material, but c4 was a very cool move by Gata, insisting to play bishop c3 and go after the pawn on e5, which is actually not really so easy to defend. Now here Studer tried to play king h7 and solve his problems in a tactical way by playing king g6 and pushing away the rook from h5. Instead, after bishop takes on e5, the American Grandmaster found a very nice tactical solution to get a winning position. Now here, after king takes on h5, bishop takes on g7, the rook of fate is under attack, plus black might be under some heavy problems after king e2, bishop f7, rook h1, and the black king might be nating net. So that's why the Swiss Grandmaster decided to play knight takes on d5. And after bishop takes on f8, knight b4, bishop g7, knight takes on d3, king e2. Now we simply get a position where white is up a pawn and still has a great position. stutter didn't hold for long. So after bishop e5, the pawn on f4 is a weakness, the pawn on b7 is a weakness. So after some accurate moves like a5, preparing to play at some point f3, knight x on b7 and secure already 2-pawn advantage. Here black played knight c6, bishop c3, knight e8, protected the pawn on b7, and after f3, king g6, king f2, bishop c6, a6 was probably the last nail in the coffin for black, because the a file black definitely cannot open. Now after b6, the pawn on a7 is a huge weakness, and after knight c8, finally black decided to resign, because after rook f7, rook d1, attacking the knight on d8 as well as rook d6 threats are too much for black to handle. So really a great victory for Gatakomsky, who solidifies his lead in the tournament. Now another very exciting game was played between Boris Gelfand against Alain Pichot, and this time they played it a highly topical Catalan. So after bishop g2, bishop e7, should castle, d4, d takes, all of this is big theory. a6, a4, c5 is currently the new trend in this position. After d takes, bishop takes on c5. Now why doesn't play queen takes on c4? Because this allows black to play b6, bishop b7, rook a7 if necessary, and bring out this typical troublesome light square bishop. Now here, after knight bd2, b5, again, very modern approach, because after a takes on b5, now it's black's turn to sacrifice a pawn, and after bishop b7, get an excellent game. And after knight g5, the players are following some of the recent high-level GM games, most notably a game between one of the best female players in the world, Alexandra Goryachkina, against Olga Bedelka. She played in round 3 of FIDE World Cup this particular line and probably caught the attention of both players. After knight e4, knight e4, knight e4, white sacrifices the pawn for some long-term initiative. After bishop d4, knight g5, now queen takes on h7 is a big threat, so this needs to be dealt with. g6, a takes, rook takes, bishop takes. So black enjoys the extra pawn, but the dark square bishop appears to be clearly misplaced, as it should have been on g7. So even if black enjoys the extra pawn at the queen side, he still needs to be tactically alert. Now after Gelfand's knight e4, f5 was a new move prepared by the Argentinian grandmaster, bishop g5, queen b6, and really amazing move by Boris Gelfand, rook a1, because after f takes on e4, there's going to be bishop e3, the queen on b6 is under attack, and so is the bishop on a7. Now after knight a6, knight f6, Gelfand went for some really huge complications and a big game, king g7, rook d1. Now rook takes on f6 is impossible because of queen c3, and this pin is going to be decisive, e5, queen e5, and black's piece coordination has seen better days. The same applies for queen f2 check, king h1. It's not even clear if black is enjoying this pawn on f2, as the queen is simply disconnected from the game. So Argentinian grandmaster found a really nice resource, e5. Now after knight e5, queen takes on f2 check, king h1, f4 perhaps was not the best decision, but then again, on the other hand, white is threatened with moves like queen d2, bishop h6, maybe at some point trap the black queen with some ideas like bishop e3, rook f1. So f4 is really an understandable choice. It also brings black's light square bishop into the game. So after g takes, bishop f5, queen c3, attacking the pawn on e5, bishop d4 seems to be necessary, and here the Israeli grandmaster made a mistake. So he played queen a3. Apparently he should have played queen d2, and after queen d2 would be witnesses to some really beautiful lines. So for example, white's threat is to play rook f1, and now after knight c5, rook f1 is actually a mistake, because this allows black to play knight e4, attacking the queen. And let's say if the queen goes away, now black would play queen g1 check and the smothered mate on f2. So this simply doesn't work for white. Instead of rook f1, the best move, at least according to the engines, is f takes on e4, but still the position is an incredible mess and a very, very difficult decision for Gelfand to make this with white. Instead, he played queen a3, and the idea is quite understandable. He's attacking the knight on a6. He's also threatening with queen e7 check, but now, after knight c5, black parries the threats, and here Gelfand made the decisive mistake, which must have been his idea all along. So he played e3, attacking the bishop on d4, as bishop b2 is met by queen c5, but he missed a very nice tactical refutation. Bishop h3 was a stunning solution for black's problems. Now, this bishop has to be taken, queen f3 check, and apparently white is suffering big losses. King g1, queen d1, bishop f1, queen g4, and the Argentine grandmaster was able to wrap up the game rather quickly. Around this moment, black is simply up 2 extra pawns. The white king is exposed, thus the experienced Israeli grandmaster decided to resign. Now, we are going to follow the third game, which was played between Maxime Lagarde against Winsome Kiemer, and it was again a big fight, which started a bit slow in one of the English openings, reverse Sicilians. The bishop d2, not really an ambitious approach, but the big events will still further. Now, black was trying to play active chess, and around here, black made a really risky choice to play queen e7, leaving the knight on d5 under attack. So after knight e5, knight c3 has to be played, knight takes on c6, knight takes on e2 has to be played, and after king f1, knight takes on g3. Now here was quite an interesting moment, as perhaps the Frenchman had to play f takes on g3 in the hindsight what would actually happen in the game. Now instead, he decided to play h takes on g3, which is a very natural choice, because normally you're supposed to take with the pawns towards the center. After queen e1, trade, b takes on c6, white got a slightly better position, but black has the chance to at some point organize an outside pass pawn. After rook e8 check, king h7, now obviously bishop takes on c6 will be met by a check either here or here, and black is fine. So here after king e1, king g6, d4, white tried to play for the domination, but the young German was very precise and in the end managed to reach about an equal endgame. Now white decided to go after the pawn on a5, which is really a reasonable choice, but this gave black enough time to organize a counterattack at the king's side. Now white won a pawn, is up a pawn. However, things started to be not really simple, as black just kept pushing that h pawn forward, and around here white already was on the defensive, because threats like h3, h2, bishop e6, bishop d5 started to be really big practical problems. So after a4, h3, a5, bishop e6, this was played, king b4, bishop c8. Here, the Frenchman apparently made a mistake. He played f3. Instead, he should have tried to play king c3, king d3, king e3. Try to go after the pawn on h3, and the logical outcome of this exciting game would have been a draw. Now, apparently f3 is a mistake. And after h2, bishop g2, here Kiemer found a nice resource. He played f5, threatening to play f4, imprisoning white's bishop on g2 and threatening with bishop h3 to push it back to h1, essentially stalemating white's bishop. So this had to be responded with f4, and now white is already under some serious problems if bishop e6, bishop d5 is really gonna work. Although white might have a saving resource to push the a pawn just in time. Now bishop a6 was played first by the German prodigy, king c3, king c7, very cool move, and here after b4 the second time control was reached, and Vincent didn't find the victory. Although I have to admit it was really study-like, it was difficult, so instead he played king d6, bishop b5, bishop a6, and as later he would express in the interview, he felt that he cannot play this position for the win because he is down a pawn, And if white will play d5, this will allow white to form two connected passed pawns at the queen side. However, the position was already winning. Had he played bishop c8 with the threat to play bishop e6, bishop d5, now white has to play d5. After c takes, white can never take on d5 because bishop b7, black trades away the bishop. And after king d4, probably the most difficult move in the position is bishop a6. Now king d5, bishop d5 is impossible due to bishop b7, and black is simply threatening to play bishop c4, bishop a2, bishop b1, and bishop e4. So white cannot play king c5. It allows black to play bishop d3 and bishop e4, and that's it. White is not in time to run for the pawn because black can just play d4, bishop b7 and trade away the bishop, or just push forward the pawn. One of the exciting lines, for example, here would be king c3, bishop c4. If king be threatening to play bishop b2, and for example, if white plays something like bishop h1, there is this exciting line. Let's say I play bishop b5, bishop a4, bishop d1. Eventually, I should be able to get to d4. At some point, even sacrificing the pawn with d4 check, then the bishop goes to c6, and black wins the game. So the game ended with a draw, but I mean, it wasn't really obvious that it indeed should be winning, and as the young German was down a pawn in the endgame, thus it was really understandable that he felt that he doesn't have chance to win the game. And finally, we have a very, very long game between Kirill Alexeyenko against Nikhil Sarin. They played this game for over 90 moves. So which started to be quiet at the start, at least. Ray Lopez, it turned out to be a very sharp one. After bishop c5, now this was the surprise by the Indian Grandmaster. It's a line which he had never played before. After c3, d4, e takes on d4, probably is not a great choice, but the main idea for black is bishop a7, offering to trade the pawn on e5 for the pawn on e4. After bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, now we're following a game of Maxim Vachier-Lagrave against Jordan Forest from the 2021 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Now here the Frenchman in the tournament played d takes, knight e5. And the Dutch Grandmaster was able to show a very nice plan from black's perspective. Now instead, the young Russian Grandmaster found an improvement, a very logical one. He played knight b2, rook e8, rook e1, rook e6. Now black was preparing to play queen e8 and take on d4, applying pressure against the pawn on e4. So after queen c2, queen e8, now Alexeyenko decided to force matters. D takes, bishop takes, and now we reach this position where white enjoys two knights against two bishops, and black has a ruined pawn structure at the queen side. So we're witnessing a very, very long game. Sarin definitely had very active bishops and decent chances. Alexeyenko kept pushing, so it was a long strategic game. Yeah, around here, Sarin decided to sacrifice the pawn on a5 to seek some active chances. And after rook d3, bishop c5, knight e2, rook a7, finally Alexeyenko took the pawn. After knight a5, bishop f7, b4, bishop b6, king g1. Here, Sarin could have just played queen a8. I think that was the most logical choice. Threatening to take on a5, maybe push c5 at some point with just an equal endgame. Now instead he probably got slightly ambitious. He played c5, and after queen e8, bishop e8, now white was up a pawn, although against two bishops. So after knight c4, bishop b5, rook d2, takes, bishop d4, rook c2, c5. We eventually got this position, and they just kept playing it and playing it. I mean, mostly it was on Alexeyenko's part because he was trying to win this position, but black should be able to hold this due to his enormous activity of the bishops. So one of the critical moments here was that after f3, bishop b4, knight e5, Sarin probably took the wrong turn. Now bishop e1 was not the best decision in the hindsight, taking into account what happened in the game. He should have played back bishop a3 and keep this bishop on the long diagonal. After bishop e1, rook c5, suddenly he started to experience problems because of incoming rook c7 threat. For example, if black plays bishop d3, there's rook c7 and rook a2. Needs to be understood what happens after knight c1, forking the bishop and the rook. Plus the pawn on f6 is also under attack. Still, the young Indian grandmaster went for this line, but here Alekseenko decided to try something else. So again, this was a long grind. Slowly, the Russian grandmaster was improving his position, the knights. The position was very close to be drawish at some point. Eventually, Kirill was able to push the pawn by one square further, then another square further, slowly improving the position. And finally, this move, rook a6, maybe it wasn't really necessary, so I imagine it must have been the nerves from the Indian grandmaster. Rook a8, rook a5 felt to be probably the most challenging moves. After rook a6, he traded the rooks. After king f2, bishop g3, king g1, bishop a6. Now white's position was slightly easier to play because the two knights are helping to push forward the pawn. So again, there was a long battle. At some point, black was very close to make a draw. So they kept playing it. About 7 hours in total the game was being played. So Alekseenko definitely was gonna try to grind this out. And the final mistake was bishop b6. Yeah, so here, Sarin missed his final chance to play bishop c7, a5, and king f4. Perhaps with some ideas at the right moment to sacrifice the bishop for the a-pawn, then collect the kingside pawns and secure a draw. But after a5, bishop d4, what he missed, that white gets this very nice resource, king e4, threatening to play f4 plus the a-pawn advances. So after bishop a2, f4 check, now king f6, white simply plays f takes on e5 and knight g4 check. So the position inevitably simplifies and white keeps his pawn on a file. So Sarin resigned a couple of moves later as a7, knight c7 allows white to position the queen and win a rook. So really exciting games were being played. 3 of the games were decisive. So let me show you the final results. Gata Kamsky beats Noel Studer after a really powerful show in the opening phase. Studer didn't really get into this game, made a dubious choice to counterattack at the king side, which backfired. Maxime Lagarde saved what appeared to be a lost endgame against Winston Kiemer. Winston didn't find this very stud-like win at the end and was quite happy to accept the draw. Alekseenko played 91 moves to beat Sarin Nikhal to score a very important victory with the white color, and also Boris Gelfand lost with the white color against Alain Pichot by blundering in a very sharp game at tactical solution. So here's the rankings after the first round of the classical tournament. Gata Kamsky leads with 15 points, followed by Kirill Alekseenko with 12 points thanks to his victory in the classical tournament. Now Kirill is back in contention, fighting for the victory in the tournament. Maxime Lagarde is in the 3rd place with 10.5, and Sarin Nikhal has dropped to the 4th place with 10 points. That being said, today continues the 2nd day of the Grandmaster Classical Tournament. The MTO or the Masters Tournament, among with other open tournaments, have started in Biel. The Biel Chess Festival is just underway, and more exciting stuff is going to continue today with the next classical games. Stay tuned and continue to watch us in the broadcast.